A tense Christmas. My sister presented me to her boyfriend with a taunting grin. This is the disappointment of our family. My parents chuckled and agreed. He kept quiet, simply observing them. The room fell completely silent. Then he gave a thin smile and said, "Funny, because you're fired and we're finished. What if the people who were supposed to love you most, the ones who shared your blood, actually used your very existence as proof of your failure? And then, years later, you realize they've been funding their golden child's success with money they stole directly from you? Doesn't that just twist your gut? What the hell happened next, you ask? Hi, I'm Elena Moore. Though for most of my life, that name felt more like an afterthought than an identity. Standing in that dining room on Christmas night, watching Chloe crumble under Daniel's words, something just snapped inside me. Maybe it was a memory. Maybe it was the ache of every single year leading up to that exact, brutal moment. Because the truth is, what went down at that dinner table didn't start there. Not even close. It started a long, long time ago, long before Chloe ever learned how to wield a smile like a weapon. I grew up in a house that always felt slightly tilted, like things were off kilter, even before I was old enough to understand imbalance. My mother, my quiet anchor, died of breast cancer when I was 15, almost 16. Her gentle hands, her tired eyes, her soft voice calling me my brave girl. When she was gone, the house emptied out in ways that had nothing to do with furniture. It was like the oxygen thinned. And before I even had a chance to process it, to really grieve her, I had to learn how to breathe again. My father remarried 6 months later. That's all it took. People said he was lonely. I think he was just terrified. Terrified of being left alone with a daughter who reminded him too much of the woman he'd lost. Tina swaggered into our lives with bright lipstick, perfect hair, and a daughter who looked like she belonged on the cover of a teen magazine. Chloe. She was a year younger than me, but she carried herself like the world owed her sunlight. She walked into our home with new clothes, new energy, new rules, and suddenly, I felt like a stranger. A guest in my own childhood. When my father looked at her, something in his face softened in a way I hadn't seen since my mother was alive. When he looked at me, he mostly just looked away. Then came their child, my half-brother, born a year later. I tried to love him, and maybe I did, in a quiet, sisterly way. But his arrival sealed it. The hierarchy. It wasn't spoken aloud, but it didn't have to be. There were 2 sets of children in our home, and 2 very different sets of rules. Chloe had dance classes, tap, ballet, jazz. I remember holding her glittery costumes while she showed off spins in the living room. She got new shoes every school year, sometimes twice. Her birthday parties were events. Banners, cakes shaped like princess castles, rented photo booths, a DJ 1 year. When she turned 16, my father handed her a set of keys tied with a red ribbon. "That's my girl," he'd beam as she squealed. Me. I got hand-me-downs and a list of chores long enough to qualify as a part-time job. "Elena, set the table. Elena, watch your brother. Elena, do the dishes so Chloe can finish her homework." When I asked if I could join the art club after school, Tina looked up from the stove, a sharp edge in her voice. "And who exactly is going to cook dinner while you draw little pictures?" My father didn't object. He never did. His silence was permission for whatever Tina wanted. I learned early that my dreams came with conditions. Chloe's. Hers came with applause. Meals were the worst reminders. Tina always served Chloe first. Bigger portions. The crispier chicken skin. The chocolate frosting corner of the cake. I waited. Sometimes I ate leftovers. Sometimes I didn't eat until everyone else was done. If I even glanced at the good pieces, Tina would say, "Don't be greedy, Elena. You always want what someone else has." When Chloe got praise, it was almost ceremonial. "That's my girl," my father would say. The pride in his voice thick, warm, unmistakable. When I got anything wrong, and it didn't take much, he barely looked at me. "Can you not cause trouble? I'm tired." Trouble. Somehow, I was always the trouble, even when I did everything right. And Tina, she had a special talent for slicing me with sweetness. Whenever I cried, or even just looked hurt, she would sigh dramatically. "You're so sensitive, just like your mother. Always emotional. It's exhausting." She used my mother's death like a leash. Anytime I pushed back on chores, on unfairness, on anything, she'd say. Your mother would be ashamed of this attitude. I stopped talking after a while. Silence felt safer. Looking back, I think they were embarrassed of me. Not just for who I was, but for who they decided I would be. They liked Chloe's shine. They liked the idea of a daughter who made them look good. And Chloe, she was perfect for that. Articulate, charming, pretty enough for people to stare. Strategic enough to notice. She learned fast that she was the center of their world, and she played the part beautifully. Once, I heard my father telling a neighbor, Chloe wants to study communications. She'll do amazing. She's so talented. The neighbor asked, and Elena? My father just shrugged. She's still figuring things out. Not everyone is college material. I was standing right there, holding a basket of laundry, so heavy my arms shook. He didn't even lower his voice. All of it built slowly, year after year, like a story someone else wrote for me. A story where Chloe was the golden child, the star, the future. And I was the comparison point, the warning sign, the disappointment. Why can't you be more like Chloe? Was practically a family motto. It hurts to say this now, but I believed them for a long time. I believed I was less, that I deserved less, that I should be grateful for scraps of time, of affection, of food, of approval. If someone gives you leftovers long enough, you start to think that's all you're meant for. So when Chloe called me the failure of our family at Christmas dinner, it wasn't new. It wasn't shocking. It was just the same old story, on a bigger stage, with better lighting and more people watching. But Daniel's reaction, his silence, his eyes, then his words, that was the first crack in that old script. The first sign that maybe the version of me they sold the world wasn't the real one. And if you're still with me, the truth gets darker before it gets better. The real breaking point came later. College, money, survival. And I'll tell you exactly how the label failure was forced onto me until I almost believed it was carved into my bones. Getting into college was the first time in years I felt something close to pride. I still remember the envelope. Thin, ordinary, nothing like the glossy acceptance packages Chloe would later receive. But inside was a partial scholarship to a state university for a design and marketing program. It wasn't fancy. It wasn't Ivy League. But it was mine. I'd earned it. For one brief moment, I let myself imagine a life where I wasn't the family's afterthought, where my work could speak louder than the labels they'd glued onto me. I showed the letter to my father with a trembling smile. He skimmed it, nodded mechanically, then placed it on the counter as if it were a grocery coupon. That's good, he said. But listen, money's tight this year. Chloe needs a strong college environment. You know how talented she is. We're sending her to Ridgeview. Private dorm, meal plan, the whole thing. He paused. So if you want to go to this place, you'll have to figure out housing and other costs yourself. There was no discussion. No attempt to find a way. No, let's see what we can do. He'd already made up his mind. Chloe's dreams deserved to be funded. Mine needed to stay small enough to pay for with a loan. So, I did what I always did. I adapted. I enrolled anyway, took out what loans I could, and found a cheap room to rent in a shared house near a bus route. Every weekday, I sat on that bus for an hour, sometimes more. Colorado traffic made time unpredictable, watching other students hop into cars their parents bought them. Then, I'd head straight to classes, scribbling notes until my wrists cramped. After that, I rushed to my part-time job at a cafe where I wiped tables, poured lattes, and forced a smile until closing. Nights blurred into a cycle of exhaustion. I'd get home around 11 p.m., start homework, and often fall asleep over my laptop. Some nights, I barely slept 4 hours. My roommates partied. I studied through the noise. Winter crept into my bones. The house heater broke. I sat in layers, typing until my fingers stung. But I kept going. I believed hard work would mean something. Meanwhile, Chloe posted pictures from her dorm. Spacious, modern, decorated in pastel shades. She bragged about her roommates, her journalism professors, her dining hall brunches. My father updated the neighbors with pride. Chloe's studying marketing. She's so gifted, really going places. Tina chimed in. She's always been special. And what about me? Oh, Elena's figuring life out, they'd say dismissively. She's not really college-oriented. I once overheard Tina telling a neighbor she doesn't have the stamina for academic pressure. Chloe was always the strong one. The neighbor said nothing, just gave me a sympathetic look as I stood there, holding a garbage bag I'd volunteered to take out. Despite the exhaustion, despite the loneliness, I pushed through that first semester. My grades weren't perfect, but they were solid. I kept hoping someone, anyone, would say they were proud. But no one asked. No one cared. Chloe continued rising like a star, and in their eyes, I existed only in her shadow, fading a little more each day. By the second semester, the weight became unbearable. Rent increased. Tips dropped. My bus route changed, adding more commute time. My job demanded extra shifts because someone quit. My grades slipped. I was skipping meals to afford textbooks. I stayed up until 3 a.m., then woke at 5 to catch the early bus. And still, no one noticed I was drowning. Then came the actual breaking point. My landlord announced he was selling the house, meaning everyone needed to move out by the end of the month. I begged the university for temporary housing, but the dorm wait list was months long. Without a place to live close enough to campus, I couldn't keep up with the commute. When I told my father I might have to withdraw temporarily, he simply sighed. Well, Elena, sometimes college isn't for everyone. Tina added, we always knew Chloe was the academic one. You're more hands-on. Maybe you should look for work instead. Something stable. She looked at me the way someone looks at a stray dog they're trying to convince themselves not to adopt. I dropped out 2 weeks later. No one offered help. No one asked what I needed. No one even helped me pack. I stuffed my clothes and 2 notebooks into trash bags and moved into a tiny studio above a laundromat, so close to the machines I could feel them vibrating through the floor. No farewell dinner. No, we're proud you tried. No comfort. Just silence. The night I moved in, Chloe texted me. Well, guess you're on your own now. Try not to screw it up this time. I stared at the message for a long time. Then I turned off my phone and sat on the edge of the creaking bed, listening to the hum of washing machines beneath me. A part of me wanted to cry, but the tears wouldn't come. It was as if I'd cried too many times already and run out. That was when the label finally stuck. Failure. Not because I failed, but because they needed me to fail to keep the family story intact. Chloe, the star. Me, the cautionary tale. But life has a way of twisting when you least expect it. I didn't know it then, sitting in that cramped studio with nothing but my determination left, that the very place where I felt most broken would become the birthplace of a version of myself even my family couldn't imagine. And the path to that transformation was harder, lonelier, and more unexpected than anything I had lived through up to that point. The studio above the laundromat wasn't much. Peeling paint. A single window that rattled when the wind hit it. A floor that shook every time someone downstairs overloaded a washing machine. But it was the first place in my life that was truly mine. No Tina knocking on the door, demanding chores. No Chloe tossing her hair and reminding me she was the star. No father looking past me as if I took up too much air. Just me. A wobbly desk I found on Craigslist. A second-hand laptop that overheated if I opened more than 3 tabs. And a determination that felt equal parts fragile and ferocious. My first clients weren't glamorous, not even close. A gas station owner who wanted a nicer sign. A small diner whose Instagram page had 3 blurry photos. A nail salon needing flyers. I charged almost nothing at first. $40 for a logo, $75 for a simple website mock-up. I underpriced myself because I didn't know any better, and because in some deep part of me, I still believed I wasn't worth more. But every project mattered. Every dollar mattered. I couldn't afford to fail. Days blurred into long cycles of work. I'd go down the street to serve tables at a Vietnamese restaurant for extra income, then rush home to design until 2 or 3 in the morning. My back ached from hunching over my laptop. My eyes burned. My stomach lived on instant ramen and discount soup cans. I slept in short bursts, always with the glow of my computer screen still drifting in my mind. But something strange happened during those late nights. I got good, really good. I devoured free online courses, UX, UI design, digital marketing strategy, SEO fundamentals, branding psychology, campaign planning. I borrowed marketing books from the public library, filled notebooks with sketches and concepts, experimented with color theory and typefaces. I treated learning like oxygen. It filled the empty spaces that my family's neglect had carved out. My turning point came from a tiny family-owned taco shop 2 blocks from my studio. The owner hired me to make some online posts. Nothing fancy. I ended up creating a mini rebrand for them. New menu designs, playful social content, bright photos using my cracked phone camera, a simple paid ad campaign targeted to the neighborhood. Within 6 weeks, their revenue jumped. Their lunch rush doubled. People lined up outside on weekends. The owner hugged me the day he showed me the numbers. "Elena, you did this," he said, with tears in his eyes. And for the first time, someone looked at my work like it mattered. Word spread. Suddenly I wasn't just taking small gigs. I was getting referrals, messages, inquiries. A boutique gym reached out, then a regional cafe chain, then a small tech startup needing brand identity. That's when I realized I needed something bigger than a desk in a shaking apartment. I rented a tiny desk at a co-working space downtown. The kind of place where people drank oat milk lattes and discussed venture capital like it was the weather. I didn't belong at first. I wore thrift store sweaters. My old laptop overheated so loudly that the guy next to me once asked if it was going to explode. But I stayed. I worked. And within a year, I officially launched my own small agency, Northbridge Creative Studio. It started with just me. Then slowly, a photographer joined part-time, a copywriter, a junior designer. They believed in me. They believed in the work. And clients noticed. Regional brands called. A startup funded by an investor group wanted a full rebrand. A real estate company needed a campaign. I ended up hiring 2 contractors just to keep up. Somewhere along this upward climb, fate, or maybe coincidence, brought Daniel into my orbit. At the time, he was the director of marketing for a mid-sized tech company. Sharp suit, sharp mind, sharper intuition. He wasn't impressed by flashy presentations or loud talkers. He cared about craft, clarity, strategy. We ended up collaborating on a pilot project for his company. He was the first high-level professional who treated me as an equal. He'd sit across from me in the meeting room, taking notes as I sketched out user journeys on a whiteboard. "You think differently," he told me once. "You see structure where others see noise." For someone who'd been called a failure for half her life, those words hit deeper than he knew. Our partnership turned into repeat work. Repeat work turned into friendship. Friendship into trust. We spent late nights discussing market gaps, branding trends, the future of digital agencies. One night after we finished a major pitch, he looked at me and said, "Why aren't we doing this on our own? Together?" I thought he was joking. He wasn't. Over the next 6 months, we built the foundation for something bigger, Northline Media Group. A modern agency, ambitious but grounded in real strategy, not empty buzzwords. Daniel became the CEO and public face. He had the presence, the connections, the confidence that opened corporate doors. And me, I became the co-founder, the architect behind the systems, the creative engine, the majority shareholder. I didn't want the spotlight. I didn't want to be the one on stage. I just wanted to build something that was mine. Something no one could take credit for except me. We kept my role quiet. Not for secrecy, but because I asked for it. I liked creating from the shadows. I liked building without having to justify myself. And if I'm honest, a part of me didn't want my family knowing. I didn't want them turning my success into something they could claim. To the outside world, and especially to my parents, I was doing freelance marketing stuff, barely scraping by. They never asked how I was doing anyway. They never asked where I lived, or whether I had food, or whether I was safe. In their eyes, Chloe's life was still the only one worth narrating. They had no idea that while they paraded Chloe as the star student, the future executive, the pride of the family, I was quietly building an empire. Brick by brick, campaign by campaign, night after night. They had no idea that the girl they dismissed, the girl who slept above a laundromat, was becoming someone powerful enough to change the trajectory of all our lives. And they definitely had no idea that their golden daughter would soon walk straight into a company I owned, completely unaware of who truly signed her paycheck. Chloe's rise after graduation was predictable, in the way a storm you see forming on the horizon is predictable. I could sense it coming long before it arrived. Once she walked across her stage in a sparkling white dress and collected her communications degree, the world, at least our family's version of the world, opened its arms to her. My father boasted to every neighbor within a 5-mile radius that Chloe was destined for greatness. Tina arranged celebratory dinners, posted filtered photos online with captions like, "So proud of our shining star." And me? I watched from a distance, quietly paying my staff, closing new contracts, and building Northline Media with Daniel, one milestone at a time. My success was deliberately invisible to them, not because I was hiding out of fear, but because I didn't owe them my story anymore. Chloe got her foot in the door at our company through someone she'd met at an alumni networking event, a senior producer who thought she had potential. Daniel, not yet knowing she was my stepsister, interviewed her. He told me later that she came across as polished, ambitious, and eager to prove herself. "She has charm," he said during our weekly strategy meeting. "A little too rehearsed. Maybe, but she could grow." My chest tightened for a moment, but I kept my expression neutral. I didn't mention Chloe. I didn't say she'd once called me a leech for borrowing her hair straightener, or that she'd spent years performing confidence while crushing mine. Instead, I simply asked, "Do you think she fits the team?" Daniel nodded. "I think she could be a good content producer with the right guidance." And just like that, Chloe walked straight into my company. Her first day at Northline was almost cinematic. She arrived in a beige trench coat, heels clicking confidently through the lobby, holding a branded notebook she bought specifically to look professional. She took selfies in the elevator mirrors. She posted on her stories. "Day 1 at Northline Media. Hard work pays off." I watched the notification from my secret burner Instagram. Yes, I kept one, only to keep tabs on things that might affect the company, and let out a quiet, ironic laugh. She had no idea that the agency she bragged about being hired into existed because I had once designed logos until my fingers cramped in a cramped studio above washing machines. When I finally saw her in the office, she didn't even recognize me at first. I was in jeans and a sweater, hair tied back, walking through the co-working space with a laptop tucked under my arm. To her, I looked like any of the dozens of creatives who floated around the building. When her eyes did land on me for a split second, she blinked, frowned faintly, then immediately turned away to continue chatting with another new hire. That became our dynamic. She ignored me publicly, but privately, she weaponized me. I overheard snippets here and there. "Yeah, my sister tried studying marketing but dropped out. I guess she just couldn't keep up. I'm the driven one in the family. She's sweet, but not really career material." To her coworkers, she was the ambitious daughter, the one who broke generational limits. I became her cautionary tale, her proof of success, by contrast. The irony was so sharp it could split bone. Daniel remained blissfully unaware of our connection at first. He genuinely tried to mentor her. Chloe offered feedback on her scripts, invited her to sit in on client calls, encouraged her growth. He didn't know the version of her I knew, the one who could slice with a single comment, the one who needed an audience to validate her existence. The funniest part, if you have a taste for dark humor, was how my family reacted. They didn't know I had anything to do with Northline. They only knew Chloe worked under Daniel, who they believed was simply her handsome, well-positioned boss. Soon, rumor turned into fact at family gatherings. "Chloe's boyfriend is her boss," my father bragged. "She's going places," Tina added. "And Elena?" someone asked once. My father shrugged, still doing some small-time freelance stuff. "We wish she'd aim higher." They said this while sitting under a billboard for a cafe chain designed by my agency that they never realized was mine. The duality of my existence became almost poetic. At home, I was the failure. At work, I was the architect of everything they admired. And Chloe, unknowingly, was drawing a paycheck with my signature. Daniel and I eventually aligned on keeping my role confidential, not because of Chloe specifically, but because he understood my boundaries. "Let them underestimate me," I told him one night as we reviewed financial projections. "It keeps the noise away." He smiled softly. "You like being the ghost in the machine?" "Exactly." So we kept two things unsaid. 1. Northline Media was my company as much as his. 2. I was the majority shareholder behind the scenes. It was a strategic silence. A weapon, really. Information is one of the most powerful tools in the world, and withholding it from the people who had underestimated me my entire life felt not like revenge, but like reclaiming a truth they had buried. Chloe had no idea the stage she was walking onto. She didn't know whose work she was presenting. She didn't know who reviewed the monthly revenue reports. She didn't know who approved hiring budgets. She didn't know that the ghost in the machine could see her metrics, her projects, her performance logs. Every mistake she tried to disguise with charm. She certainly didn't know that one day, her ambition would collide directly with my patience, and that collision would become the explosion that unraveled everything. But at that moment, watching her pose at the office coffee bar and flirt her way through introductions, I stayed silent. There was no reason to intervene. Not yet. Because the thing about storms is they don't destroy instantly. They gather pressure. They spiral. They build. And Chloe had just stepped into the eye of one she created herself. It happened on a Tuesday morning. The kind of morning where the sky was gray, the office was quiet, and nothing seemed important enough to prepare me for the punch that was coming. I was reviewing wireframes for a new client when my phone buzzed with a LinkedIn notification. Normally I ignored them, but the preview caught my eye. So proud to have led this campaign. And there it was. Chloe's face, smiling confidently beneath the Northline logo, announcing a brand new marketing campaign she had supposedly developed from scratch. My stomach tightened. I clicked the post. The tagline, the visual direction, the emotional hook, even the color palette. Every piece of it was identical to the concept document I had drafted weeks earlier and shared only with Daniel for an internal proposal. It wasn't just similar. It was mine, word for word in some parts. She didn't even bother changing the structure of the pitch deck she used in her video. At first, I felt confusion, then disbelief, then a cold, sinking clarity. She had taken my work. Not by accident, not by coincidence. She had gone into our internal folders I built, structured and protected, and stolen an entire campaign, as if it were a pair of earrings she could slip into her purse. A message popped up on my screen before I could even process my anger. It was from a young intern on the content strategy team. A kind, shy kid who reminded me a little of my younger self. "Hey, I'm not sure if I should be telling you this," the message began. But something weird happened yesterday. What followed made my fingers go numb. He told me Chloe had bragged in the break room, loudly, that her pathetic sister once tried to pitch a similar idea but never followed through. So, she decided to fix it and make it actually usable. She laughed about it, mocked my supposed failure, said I'd never amount to anything, and the room full of junior staff listened, taking her words as gospel because they didn't know I was the actual architect behind half the systems they used daily. Then came the part that made my vision blur. The intern had witnessed Chloe accessing the shared drive, downloading my original concept, scrubbing the metadata, renaming the file, and uploading her version. She even deleted traces of the original draft from one folder. Not enough to erase the trail completely, but enough to make it seem like she authored the idea. My throat tightened. It wasn't just theft. It was a calculated erasure. When Daniel saw her post later that morning, he walked into my office slowly, holding his tablet like it had turned into something toxic. "Elena," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "Can we talk?" I expected him to ask whether we should congratulate Chloe publicly, or whether I had worked with her on the idea. Instead, he asked, "Did you authorize this?" I shook my head. Daniel exhaled long and heavy. "I didn't think so." Something about her presentation felt off. Then he lowered his voice. "You deserve credit for this." But it wasn't the first sign he'd noticed. Over the next several days, internal complaints began trickling to his desk. Chloe had been using her newfound visibility to throw her weight around, criticizing other designers, undermining analysts, pushing sloppy ideas, then blaming interns when they failed. And buried within those reports were conversations she had started about a washed-up designer in the industry who never made it past entry level because she lacked ambition. She used my life as a warning story to other women in meetings. She talked about me as though I were someone to pity, someone to avoid becoming. And she did it while benefiting from my work. Once, during a product meeting, she even told a room full of coworkers, "Honestly, if you don't want to end up like my sister, job hopping, no real career, take initiative. Don't wait for handouts." Hearing that secondhand was like being slapped in a dark room where no one knew I was present. I realized something deeply painful. Their cruelty hadn't just wounded me, it had shaped her. She grew up believing she was superior because the household taught her that I was the example of failure. So stealing from me wasn't immoral to her. It was natural. It was justified. It was what she believed she deserved. One afternoon, Daniel pulled me into the conference room and shut the door. "I think we need to talk about Chloe," he said. The air felt dense. I nodded silently. He lowered the blinds, pulled up the access logs for the drive, and showed me timestamps. "She downloaded your file on Monday at 3:17 p.m., renamed it 15 minutes later. Deleted 2 associated documents from the folder. And there's more. Look!" He opened another report. Unauthorized consulting fees paid to a personal account under Chloe's name. Money she had slipped from the marketing operations budget. She wasn't just borrowing ideas. She was stealing company funds. I sat down because my legs suddenly felt weak. It was almost poetic, in a twisted way. My past and present colliding. My sister, the golden child, had stolen my future once when she took the college. Fun that should have been mine. And now she was doing it again, reaching into a space I had built with my own blood and time, carving pieces out of it to polish her own reflection. I felt a sharp sting behind my eyes, but not sadness. Recognition. This was who Chloe had always been. This was who my family had taught her to be. Daniel placed a hand on the table. His voice steady. "Elena, I'm sorry." I swallowed. For what? For not seeing it sooner. I didn't cry, though I could have. Instead, I felt a familiar hollowness. The same one I felt the day I left for college on the bus. The night I moved above the laundromat. The moment my father said Chloe deserved everything more. Except now, my hollowness wasn't helpless. It was fuel. Because it wasn't just about stolen work, or stolen money, or stolen credit. It was about the realization that no matter how far I had climbed, from a cramped studio to co-owning a rising agency, my sister had found a way to reach into my world and treat it with the same disdain she treated me with growing up. And that was when the bottom truly dropped out. Not because I felt powerless, but because I finally understood that she had stepped into a battlefield she didn't even know existed. And I was done playing quietly. Daniel and I didn't rush. That was the first sign to me, at least, that this wasn't going to be an emotional reaction or a blow-up argument in some hallway. It was going to be a dismantling. Piece by piece, brick by brick. The way you take apart a machine to show exactly which screw is rusted. We sat down together in the conference room late one evening after everyone else had gone home. The office lights were dim, the city beyond the windows quiet. Daniel placed his laptop on the table like it was an evidence box. I opened mine beside his. And then we began. First came the access logs. Every action made on the company drive is recorded. Time. User, device, location. Daniel clicked through the timeline slowly. "Here," he said, pointing. Monday, 3:17 p.m. Chloe accessing her concept file. She downloaded it here. Then a few minutes later, 3:03 p.m. file renamed under her directory. At 3:40 p.m., it was uploaded into a new folder she created. And then, the part that made my jaw clench, 2 associated drafts had been deleted. Not moved. Deleted. Daniel opened another folder, internal presentations. "Look at this." There it was. A pitch deck with Chloe's name in the corner. Chloe Moore, lead creative. She had taken my concept and represented herself as the originator. The deck included screenshots from my original prototype, color codes I had selected, and one line verbatim from my research summary. Then we moved to emails. Some were innocuous, forwarded client briefs, scheduling follow-ups. Others weren't. One thread showed Chloe messaging a junior designer, instructing him to clean up a slide that clearly originated from my drafts. Another asked a strategist to expand on my idea despite her never having contributed a single note to that idea. We opened Slack conversations. She'd been subtly undermining team members, pushing blame when deadlines were off, and painting herself as a victim of incompetent colleagues. Then Daniel clicked into one final tab, screenshots. A whistleblower from the analytics team had sent him privately. In them, Chloe was venting about me. "She's exactly what happens when you have no ambition," she wrote. "She's my sister, and she still hasn't made a proper career. I had to fix her idea because she can't think strategically." Seeing my life used as a punchline inside my own company, that was its own kind of sting. But the twist came next. Daniel opened the financial dashboard. At first, it looked normal. Transaction logs, budget allocations, vendor payments. But then he highlighted a string of small consulting fees. $300 here, $700 there, $1,200 the next month, each labeled vaguely as external audit support or strategy consultation. He zoomed in on the account numbers. They all pointed to the same personal checking account, Chloe's, and each payment coincided with her social media posts, flaunting new purchases, handbags, spotty new clothes, and eventually, a down payment on a white Jeep Cherokee she had proudly shown off. She's been siphoning budgeted funds, Daniel said, his voice tightening. It's fraud, clear as day. As I scrolled through the transactions, another memory clawed its way up, one I had buried for years. The night my father told me he couldn't contribute to my college housing. The day Tina mentioned tuition was tight because Chloe deserved a good education. Their insistence that Chloe's needs came first. For years, something about that didn't sit right. Now I knew why. I pulled out the old binder from my bag, the one with all my childhood documents. I hadn't looked at it in years. I flipped through until I found the college savings account information, the bonds my grandparents had left me, the documentation that had belonged to my mother. My heart sank as I compared the balance at age 15 to the near-zero balance 2 years later. Daniel watched me carefully. They used it. I nodded slowly. They emptied it. I whispered. Everything my grandparents saved for me. Everything my mother left behind. It's all gone. To send Chloe to a private college. To fund her study abroad semester. To buy her a car because every young woman needs to feel safe. All while telling me I wasn't college material. All while calling me ungrateful for questioning why they couldn't help. Daniel leaned back in his chair, rubbing a hand over his face. Elena, this is more than an office issue. This is systemic theft. Personal, financial, professional. And that was when something inside me clicked. I wasn't crying. I wasn't shaking. I wasn't even angry anymore. I felt an icy, focused calm. The kind you feel right before a storm breaks. We gathered everything. Access logs, screenshots, Slack messages, email chains, transaction reports, bank statements from my childhood, screenshots of Chloe's bragging posts, her consulting fee deposits, her stolen pitch deck. Every digital footprint she left behind like breadcrumbs leading straight into a fire. Daniel organized the files into a legal folder. This is enough for termination, an internal audit, and potential legal action. Then he went silent for a long moment. Elena, I need to ask. He met my eyes. Do you want to handle this quietly? We can terminate her with a bland statement. Or he paused. Do you want it all revealed? No filters, no softening. Real consequences. There it was. The question that divided the old version of me from the woman I had become. I thought of my father handing Chloe car keys while telling me not to cause trouble. I thought of Tina rolling her eyes every time I touched a sketchbook. I thought of Chloe's laugh in the break room as she mocked the sister she believed had failed. I thought of the years they spent building a narrative where I was the burden, the disappointment, the dead end. So I looked Daniel in the eye and said, with a calm I didn't know I possessed, I want them to see who their failure became. And I don't need to shout. I want the truth to speak for me. Daniel nodded once. Then he closed the laptop with a quiet click. The kind of click that marks the end of one story and the beginning of a reckoning. The night of the Christmas dinner felt unreal from the second I stepped through the doorway. My parents' house in Aurora was glowing like a showroom. Garlands on every railing. An oversized tree dripping with ornaments. A dining table set for 20 with polished silverware we only used when my parents wanted to impress. The whole house smelled of rosemary, turkey, and cinnamon sugar pies. Laughter drifted room to room. It was the kind of scene that should have felt warm. But it didn't. It felt staged, like a performance. And I had been assigned the same role I always played. The helper, the background noise, the daughter who blended into shadows. Tina handed me an apron before I even removed my coat. Elena, help me plate the hors d'oeuvres. Chloe's guests will be here soon. Try not to drop anything this time. Guests, I repeated. She rolled her eyes. Her boyfriend and some coworkers. Important people, of course. Important people deserve to see the family at its most curated, and me at my smallest. I slipped into my usual position, standing at the edge of the kitchen, arranging trays, passing dishes, being invisible. My father walked by twice without acknowledging me. My brother asked where to find extra napkins, not how I'd been. To them, I wasn't a guest. I wasn't even family. I was labor. Then Chloe arrived. Gold dress, perfect curls, lips glossy red. She glowed with the confidence of someone who'd never been told no in her life. And behind her, holding a bottle of wine and wearing a crisp navy coat, was Daniel. My breath caught for a split second, not because of him, but because of the way Chloe clung to his arm like a trophy she'd won. "Everyone," she announced dramatically, stepping into the living room as if stepping onto a stage. "This is Daniel, CEO of Northline Media, my boyfriend." My father cheered. My aunt clapped. A cousin whistled. Tina pressed a hand to her chest like she was watching a royal wedding. I stayed where I was, half hidden by a stack of plates, trying not to exist too loudly. Chloe launched into her performance. "Daniel is brilliant. You should see the influence he has at work. I've been learning so much under him. I'm basically his right hand now." I watched Daniel's face. Calm, polite, scanning the room with that quiet sharpness he always had when pieces didn't fit. Then it happened. Of course it did. Chloe always needed her finale. She grabbed Daniel's hand and pulled him toward me. I straightened instinctively, wiping my palms on my jeans. "This," Chloe said loudly, pointing at me as if introducing a prop, "is my sister. The failure of our family." The room erupted. Laughter. Sharp. Careless. Cruel. My father nodded in agreement. "She never could keep up with Chloe," he said proudly, as if he were complimenting his own parenting. Tina added, "We love her, but she's lost." Someone snickered. "At least Chloe's the successful one." It was a familiar sting, but still it hit. Every cruelty from childhood condensed into one moment under bright Christmas lights. I braced myself for Daniel's polite smile, or his uncomfortable laugh, or his attempt to smooth over the awkwardness. But he didn't do any of those things. He went still. Absolutely still. He looked at Chloe, then at my father, then at Tina, then finally at me. Really looked at me as if to say, "I see exactly what's happening." The room quieted, expecting him to join the mockery. He didn't. Daniel set his wine glass on the table with deliberate care. Then, in a voice clear enough to slice through every conversation, he said, "Interesting. Because you're fired, Chloe." Silence. A fork fell from someone's hand. Daniel continued, "And we're done." He said it calmly. Not angry. Not loud. Just final. The way a door closes when it's never opening again. Chloe's smile collapsed. "A what?" "What?" Daniel stopped joking. But Daniel wasn't joking. He pulled his iPad from his coat and tapped the screen. "I think your family should see something." And then, before 20 witnesses, under twinkling lights and a garland made of fake pine, he projected everything onto the TV. First, the original concept file I'd created. My name in the metadata, timestamps, draft layers, the full creative path. Then, the version Chloe had presented as her own. Her login history, her edits, her deleted files, her emails labeling herself lead creative, her consulting fees, the stolen money transferred into her personal account. Each line item lit up on the screen like a confession. Gasps rippled through the room. My father blinked rapidly, as if the screen were lying. Tina clutched the back of a chair. My brother whispered, "No way." And Chloe, she looked like her world was cracking open in slow motion. Daniel turned to the room. "What she stole does not belong to her. And just so everyone here understands the gravity, Elena is the co-founder and majority shareholder of Northline Media. She built the systems your daughter exploited." Every face turned toward me, as if I'd been invisible and suddenly materialized. Daniel finished. "Chloe is terminated effective immediately for IP theft, fraud, and breach of trust. HR will follow up, and yes, the industry will be informed." He stepped back. The decision was final. No negotiation. No softening. My father sputtered. "Elena co-founder? That's impossible. She's..." He trailed off, unable to finish the sentence he'd been reciting my whole life. Tina stared at me like she'd never seen me before. My brother looked embarrassed for Chloe, not for me. And Chloe, her face blotchy, eyes darting around the room, finally screamed, "You're lying." She's nothing. She's a failure. But the truth was glowing on the screen behind her. And for the first time, she was the one who had no audience left to perform for. Daniel closed his iPad. "Merry Christmas," he said coldly. And just like that, the entire narrative my family had built, the hierarchy, the favoritism, the mockery, shattered in front of every person who once laughed at my expense. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I simply breathed. For the first time in my life, the room was quiet for me. Not because I was invisible, but because they finally saw me. The morning after the Christmas disaster arrived cold and gray. The kind of morning where the air itself feels bruised. I'd barely slept. My phone had exploded overnight. Missed calls from relatives. Frantic messages from cousins. 3 different voicemails from Tina, alternating between hysterical crying and furious demands. I ignored all of them. Around 10 a.m., someone pounded on my apartment door, hard enough to rattle the frame. I already knew who it was. I opened it to find my father and Tina standing there, stiff and tense, holding a manila envelope like it was some sacred offering. They didn't greet me. They brushed past me into my living room, as if they still had that right. Tina set the envelope on my coffee table and inhaled shakily. "Elena, we need to talk. This situation has gone too far." Situation. They said it like Chloe's fraud was a spilled drink at a dinner party. My father cleared his throat. "Your sister is devastated. What Daniel did." "What she did," I corrected. He waved a hand dismissively, as if correcting him was impolite. "Regardless, your involvement has made things difficult, but we came with a solution." I didn't sit. Neither did they. Tina pushed the envelope toward me. "Inside is paperwork to transfer part of the house into your name and a portion of your inheritance early." The word inheritance made something deep inside me go cold. I opened the envelope. Deeds, account transfers, a check. But attached were 3 additional pages, conditions. "If you sign these," my father said, smoothing his tie, "you agree not to pursue legal action against Chloe, not to report anything to HR or the industry board. And you'll tell Daniel this was just a misunderstanding. Misunderstanding. Fraud. Theft. Lies boiled down to a misunderstanding because it benefited their golden child." Tina clasped her hands dramatically. "Honey, family keeps things inside the family. You don't air dirty laundry. You don't ruin your sister's future over a mistake. She's fragile. She's worked so hard. You owe her the chance to rebuild." I stared at them. "I owe her?" "Yes," Tina insisted. "She's always been there for you, and she's the face of the family, and now your father's clients. Our reputation. People talk. You have to protect family." There was no apology, no accountability, no acknowledgement of what Chloe had done. Just expectations that I should swallow it again for the sake of the image they worshipped. I picked up the paperwork, scanning the financial details with a sinking feeling. Something wasn't right. The inheritance funds weren't listed as coming from my parents' estate. They were drawn from an account with my name in the metadata, then from another account with the name of my grandparents, the same trust they'd left for me when I was a child. A trust one thought had disappeared. A trust one had unknowingly lived without while Chloe thrived. I flipped through more pages. The dates matched the years I begged them for help with college. The years they told me they couldn't spare a dime. The years Chloe got private school, dorms, semester abroad, a car. All from money meant for me, not them. Me! My hands tightened on the papers. "This isn't yours to give." My father stiffened. "What are you implying?" Before I could answer, a knock on my door interrupted us. My aunt, my mother's sister, stepped inside without waiting for permission. She looked tired, angry, and sad all at once. In her hand were printouts, old bank statements, copies of the trust documents. "I thought you should see this," she said quietly, handing them to me. "Your mother left clear instructions that these accounts were for you. Only you. I didn't know what happened to them until last night." Tina went pale. My father swore under his breath. My aunt continued. "I requested copies from the bank this morning. The withdrawals happened after your mother passed, and they were signed under your father's guardianship." Guardianship? The legal right to manage my accounts. They had used it to drain everything meant for me to build Chloe's future. For years, I thought I was simply unlucky. For years, I thought maybe I wasn't worth investing in. For years, I believed them when they said they couldn't help me through school. But the truth was so much worse. Tina regained her voice first. Elena, honey, you're blowing this out of proportion. We needed that money for Chloe. She had promise. She had potential. And look, we're offering some of it back now. I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was unbelievable. So let me get this straight, I said slowly. For years, you told everyone I failed because I wasn't good enough. You told me I wasn't college material. You let me struggle, work double shifts, ride buses in the snow, while you spent my savings to make Chloe look like the family's success story. Neither of them answered. Their silence was finally honest. I held up the papers. You called me a failure, but you built your entire star daughter on money you stole from the one you said would never be anything. Tell me, how does that work? How do you steal from a failure to build a masterpiece? My father's expression twisted. If you tell anyone about this, Elena, you'll ruin this family. We'll have no choice but to tell them our side, the truth about how ungrateful you've always been. We can make sure they know what you really are. There it was. The threat. The manipulation. The final card they always played. I took the documents, tore them in half, then tore them again into small, deliberate pieces, falling like confetti onto the floor. No deal, I said softly. Not now. Not ever. Tina gasped. Do you realize what you're throwing away? I nodded. Yes. Your control. My father pointed a shaking finger at me. You'll regret this. I stepped back from them, the old fear gone, replaced by something steadier than anger, clarity. No, I said, for the first time in my life. I won't. And then I opened the door, letting the cold winter air cut through the room like truth itself. Leave. They did. Faces tight, voices cracking, the illusion finally crumbling around them. And as the door clicked shut behind them, I knew something with absolute certainty. They weren't here to fix anything. They were here to preserve Chloe's world, the world they built by stealing mine. The smear campaign started faster than I expected, faster than any apology, any acknowledgement, any attempt for my family to face what they'd done. Less than 24 hours after I tore up the papers in my living room, Chloe went silent across all her public accounts. Then, like a switch had been flipped, a wave of anonymous posts began spreading online. At first, it was subtle. A vague comment in a local marketing Facebook group about a toxic female co-founder sabotaging her own sister. Then a Reddit thread claiming someone in Denver's creative community was mentally unstable, jealous, and known for stealing ideas. They never used my name, but the breadcrumbs were intentional, just specific enough that people in our industry would guess. Then, an anonymous LinkedIn account tagged 2 of our clients with a long paragraph accusing me of plagiarizing Chloe's work, framing her, and emotionally manipulating the CEO for personal gain. I didn't need detective skills to know who wrote it. The voice, the tone, the choice of words. It was Chloe, wearing a paper-thin mask. Within hours, she escalated. Posts appeared on a marketing gossip forum. Tweets from burner accounts calling me a failure who finally snapped. Comments under Northline's ads asking if the company was still letting IP thieves run things. But the part that surprised me wasn't Chloe. It was my parents. They began sending messages to the extended family, texts, voice memos, even a family-wide group email titled The Truth About Elena. In it, my father claimed I had always been envious, that I destroyed Chloe's career out of spite, and that I was unstable and needed help. Tina added her signature dramatic flair. We tried for years to support Elena, but she has always rejected love. Please pray for her. They were rewriting history, turning my boundaries into betrayal, my silence into villainy. I'd like to say it didn't affect me, that I was unshakable by then. But the truth is, watching your own family weaponize their narrative against you is a special kind of heartbreak. A few clients reached out politely, but cautiously. One email read, Hi Elena, we came across some concerning posts circulating online. Can we schedule a call to understand what's going on? In the past, I would have apologized. I would have tried to justify, soften, explain, beg them to. Believe me, I would have taken their doubt as my failure. But not anymore. Not after everything I'd uncovered. Not after seeing the truth laid out in logs, statements, documents. So, I didn't respond emotionally. I responded professionally. Daniel and I met with our attorney that same afternoon. We slid over the evidence folder we'd compiled. Timestamps, the stolen files, the financial transfers, the screenshots, the family trust documents, everything. Our attorney's eyebrows shot up more than once. This, she said, tapping the stack, isn't just workplace misconduct. This is criminal, and the online harassment makes it worse. I'll draft the cease and desist letters immediately and the non-disparagement orders. Chloe and anyone acting on her behalf will receive them by morning. Her tone was firm, clean, sharp. It felt like air after months underwater. We preserved every email, every anonymous message, every thread and comment Chloe had posted. Even the voicemails from my parents where they alternated between begging and threatening. When the legal notices went out, the online chatter died almost instantly. The burner accounts vanished. The posts were deleted. The rumors fizzled. Not all the damage could be undone. We lost 2 contracts, small ones, but still. Yet, the majority of our clients stayed. Because when they asked for proof, I sent the same evidence we'd given to legal. Clean, organized, without dramatics. Almost every client responded with the same line. Thank you for your transparency. We trust you. It stunned me. The idea that people could actually choose to believe me, not because they had to, but because they respected me. It was a kind of validation I had never experienced from the people who raised me. But the biggest shift, the one that marked a turning point in my life, happened quietly. Late one evening, after sending out our final batch of emails, I opened my phone and scrolled through my contacts. I hovered over Chloe's name, then my father's, then Tina's, then the entire extended family. My thumb didn't tremble. My pulse didn't spike. I just chose. I blocked them. Every one of them. On every platform. Phone, email, social media, messaging apps. Everything. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was peaceful. Like shutting a door in a house that had been leaking cold air for years. For the first time in my life, I chose myself over the illusion of family harmony. I chose the truth over their version of it. I chose boundaries over blood. And as the digital world finally quieted, I realized something profound. Cutting ties didn't feel like losing anything. It felt like reclaiming space in my own life. The smear campaign had been their final attempt to pull me back down. One last desperate grab at controlling the narrative. But I didn't sink. I didn't fight in the mud. I rose slowly, deliberately, by stepping out of the war they created. Because sometimes, healing doesn't come from winning the argument. It comes from walking away from the people who require you to lose yourself to keep their peace. 1 year later, my life looked nothing like the version my family once predicted for me. The change didn't happen overnight. It unfolded in small, steady steps, quiet decisions, deliberate boundaries, and the slow rebuilding of a self that had once been shaped entirely by other people's voices. But a year is enough time for a life to shift its center of gravity. Enough time for a person to choose a new world entirely. I moved to Seattle, a city that felt like fresh air and second chances. Rainy mornings, soft gray light, coffee shops on every block. It suited me. Northline opened a new office downtown, an airy studio overlooking Elliott Bay, with a growing team who didn't just respect my leadership, they thrived under it. We expanded into sustainability campaigns, mental health nonprofits, and socially conscious tech projects. The work felt meaningful. The clients aligned with my values. The company grew not from noise or spectacle, but from consistency and integrity. Daniel remained the public-facing CEO. But within the company, everyone now knew the truth, who built the core systems, who shaped the vision, who quietly guided every major campaign. And they treated me accordingly, not with exaggerated praise or forced admiration, but genuine respect, the kind I never had growing up. As for my family, the consequences of their choices unfolded slowly, inevitably. Chloe was blacklisted. The termination, the flagged HR reports, and the documented fraud made her unemployable in any reputable marketing firm. Every application she submitted was red flagged in the industry portals. She tried freelancing under a different name, but clients eventually discovered the truth. She bounced between temporary administrative jobs, short-term contracts, retail shifts. anything that didn't require references. Her social media went from curated glamour to silence. I didn't celebrate her downfall. I didn't watch with glee. But I did feel something settle inside me. A quiet acknowledgement that actions eventually catch up to everyone. My parents didn't escape either. The audits triggered by the trust documents reached the IRS. Those creative withdrawals they made under my name, they had to answer for them. Lawyers became involved. Assets were reviewed. They ended up selling their boat, then their vacation cabin, then refinancing the house they once flaunted. Tina stopped posting pictures of lavish dinners. My father stopped boasting about his star daughter. Their world shrank financially and socially. I didn't interfere. I didn't watch closely. But I heard enough to know that they were finally living within the consequences of choices they believed they'd never have to face. And then came my first Christmas on my own terms. No screaming matches. No forced smiles. No hierarchy of who mattered more. Just warmth. I hosted a small gathering with the people who had become my chosen family. My team, a few close friends, Daniel's partner and her little daughter, neighbors who had welcomed me during my first months in Seattle. We cooked together, laughed over burnt cookies, exchanged small gifts we had made rather than bought. Then, before dinner, we bundled up in coats and scarves and spent the evening delivering care packages, blankets, socks, warm meals, to the unhoused community near Pioneer Square. We donated toys to a local shelter for children. We visited a retirement home to drop off holiday cards. It felt like the kind of Christmas I had always imagined as a child, but never experienced in my own family's house. Without cruelty disguised as humor. Without competition or comparison. Without being assigned the role of background servant. Standing under the soft glow of streetlights that night, I felt lighter than I had in years. Not healed completely. Healing isn't a destination, but whole enough to breathe freely. And I realized something important. Even after everything, even with the distance, the betrayal, the years lost, a part of me still felt the old ache for the family I wished I had. But I didn't regret walking away. Not for a moment. Because cutting ties wasn't revenge. It wasn't punishment. It was self-respect. It was reclaiming control over a story I didn't write, but was forced to live through. It was choosing peace over proximity. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to step out of the fire, even if the people who lit it share your blood. So if you're listening to this, wherever you are in the world, let me tell you what took me nearly 3 decades to learn. Blood is not a license for abuse. You are allowed to protect your work, your mind, your peace. You are allowed to walk away from people who only love the version of you that serves their story. And if your family has ever used you as the scapegoat, the shadow, the footnote to make someone else shine, you do not have to stay in that role. You can step out. You can choose again. We don't get to pick the family we are born into, but we absolutely get to choose the family we build. And I'd love to know something, if you're comfortable sharing. Where are you listening to this story from? Because somehow I have a feeling that out there, in places I've never been, someone else is quietly learning to choose themselves too.